What's up, guys? Super special interview coming your way today on the podcast. Cannot wait for you to listen to this one. We're bringing on a former Heisman Trophy running back, the man who played for Texas, played many years in the NFL. He's a cannabis advocate as well. His name is Ricky Williams. You're not going to want to miss this one. I want to also remind you guys that this episode's being brought to you by Rip Nutrition. It's a locally owned and operated supplement store here in the Treasure Valley of Idaho. You know, they've got a ton of supplements out there, including the RIP series, along with Hyped Sups, Insane Labs, Bucked Up, Innova Farm, Chaotic Labs, a ton more. Make sure to go check them out. I've got the link here to the address in the description of the podcast, but they're a sponsor of the show. Amazing. They've got tons of proteins. They've got products for weight loss, muscle building, pre-workouts, stem-free pre-workouts, everything you need. And they're available for consultations as well. So if you're an athlete, if you're a parent, whatever, if you're just a fitness enthusiast, maybe you're new to the game and you want to learn a little bit more about the supplements you're taking, check it out. Go to Rip Nutrition and they will get you taken care of. Again, guys, such an amazing interview coming your way. We're going to be learning from one of the best to do it in the NFL, a guy I watched for many years as I was growing up and had a major just fandom for this guy. I'm a fanboy, but now I get to bring him onto my platform. This is the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru Podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru Podcast. My name is Shane Larson, host of the show, 6 years running. Want to give a massive shout out to all the listeners who have joined us, 179 countries, all 50 states, and it's thanks in large part to every one of you guys who have, tuned in at some point during the last 6 years and have listened to our guests on the show. We've had a variety of interviews. Every single Friday, we drop a new episode where I interview sports figures. We get to learn about their lives. We get to learn about the things that they've learned throughout their journey and really just kind of get the insight from them. And I want to give a shout out to all the athletes that listen to this podcast. I coach basketball, and I know there's a lot of young athletes that are in the high school range that, tune in and their parents tune in. So I'm just grateful for your guys' support as well. And I hope you guys take notes today because we're talking to an amazing guest. As you guys heard in the introduction, man, this dude, I can't even speak enough kind words about this guy. I am a huge fan. I'm a fanboy of this guy. I've been watching him since I was young. Heisman Trophy winner in the late 90s, 98 from Texas, all-pro running back in the NFL. And, man, I'm just so excited to bring him on. His name is Ricky Williams. Ricky, thanks so much for joining the show, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So, Ricky, I want to kind of go back in time because there's a couple of things I wanted to dissect in this interview. I mean, like I said, I've been a fan of yours from the time you were at Texas. I was in the 5th grade, I believe, when you were at Texas, which is wild to me now that I'm like 34 years old. I'm talking to you. But the thing is you always were like the guy that had the swag, the visor and everything. And all my friends growing up through middle school and high school, we always talked about how dope you looked in your uniform. And like everybody wanted to be like you. Everyone talked about Dion being like the swag, but no. Ricky had the swag. That's what we always said. He had the visor and he was like the first to really do it that way. And just was a huge fan of yours. But I want to go back in time. If we could rewind the clock prior to your college football experience, talking about your sports experience growing up, because what a lot of people might not know is that you played multiple sports. In fact, you played them at a high level, specifically baseball as well. But talk about when you really got into competitive athletics and the sports that you competed in and how they might have coexisted with each other, how baseball affected football, and if there was anything else that you competed in as well.
Yeah. So, for me, the story goes back to when I was 5. I was 5 years old. I was in kindergarten. And my kindergarten teacher, she really believed in physical education. So it wasn't something that the school mandated, but every morning we would walk down to the field and we would jog 2 laps around the field. And I remember thinking, why do we have to do this? And after like the first week, the idea popped into my head is, I wonder if I can be the first one to finish, competitive. Okay. And so I ran my little heart out and I lapped a couple of people and it started to settle in as my identity. And so every single day for the rest of the school year, I was the first one to finish the 2 laps around and became the fastest kid in kindergarten. Right. And even at the end of the year, in elementary school, when they do the awards banquet, okay, I got my first award for physical education. Right. And I don't know if it was synchronicity or my mom consciously did it, but she transferred my sisters and I to a different school. And in Southern California, they have what's called a magnet program. And they have certain schools spread out across the county where that specialize in science or arts or different things. And my elementary, Green Elementary, specialized in physical education. So from first grade until sixth grade, I had, the normal recess and everything, but I had an hour of physical education every single day.
Oh, wow.
Really, like, we had like 6 PE teachers. So it was the focus of our school. And so I grew up in that environment, where I was appreciated and rewarded and had a sense of identity, because in an athletic magnet school, I was the most athletic kid in my grade, or one of the top 3. And in elementary school, I started playing Little League. I started playing T-ball when I was in the 2nd grade, and that was my first organized competitive sport. And I didn't start playing football until I entered the 7th grade. When I started playing football, so I was known as a baseball player. My dream as a kid was to be the next Tony Gwynn. I grew up in San Diego.
All right.
So I wanted to be a baseball player. And then I started playing football. And I was better. I kind of surprised myself with how good I was as a football player. I played running back and I played a little defense. And I just love to run and I love to hit people. And I'm smart, so I picked up the game. And then it really took off. And so I enter high school. I'm on the varsity baseball team, the varsity football team. And by the time I get to my junior year, I realized I want to try to do both of these, because I want to be a professional baseball player, but I love college football. So I wanted to play college football. And I thought I grew up being a Bo Jackson fan. So I thought, I'll go to college and I'll play football. And in the summers during college, I'll play minor league baseball. And then when I'm done with football, I'll go full-time to baseball. That was the plan. Wow. But I was so much better at football than I was at baseball that I kind of gave up on that plan and went the football route.
Man, it's so wild, like how it goes all the way back to kindergarten. I'm sure if somebody like, a lot of high-level athletes probably can go back in time and kind of pinpoint a time, but I don't know if anyone's going to say kindergarten. Most of the time I've talked to athletes, they'll say around 7-8 years old, but kindergarten, man, like you're young.
Yeah.
That's wild. Ricky, as you were making that decision, you knew you were going to be playing at the collegiate level, at least for football. Like you knew you were that talented, especially in the high school realm, I guess. Talk to me about the preparation and the transition from the high school game where you were playing to then playing at Texas, like a very prominent university, big football program. What was the transition going from a high school student athlete to that of a collegiate student athlete, and a high level one at that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing about the transition is the fit. The fit.
Interesting.
So I coached a little college football, and one of my jobs was recruiting. And there'd be kids, good, like a lot of talent, and they want to go to a big school because that's where their friends want them to go and their family. But if they go to that big school, they're not going to play, right? But smaller schools, want them to start as a freshman, and they have this choice to make. Right. And so someone who wants to go to college and just enjoy the experience of being on a football team, but they really want the education side of it, and they're like, I'll do the football thing, but it'll pay for my education. Go to the big school, right? Where you're not going to start, like do that. You'll enjoy the process. But if football is, you love football and you got to be on the field, don't go to somewhere where you're going to redshirt or have to play behind somebody. That's not going to be a good fit for you. And so I think if athletes, when they are young and they're going through the recruiting process, they're conscious of fit, and fit means what do you want your college athletic and academic experience to be like, right? Like erase any idea of who the schools out there. Like start with yourself. What do you want to get out of the experience? That's what I did, and then start to go around and see which opportunity, right, allows you to have the best chance to have that experience. Okay. And then if you do that, the transition is so much easier. Okay. Speaking from experience, I knew exactly what I wanted. I found it at Texas. I knew I was going to come in and start. So I was ready for it. It was an adjustment. I had to learn the playbook quick, and I had to, learn the hard way, meaning learning from my mistakes and being okay with that. And that's the other thing. When you're young, you have to assume you're going to make mistakes. And so start to work on your mental attitude about how you're going to bounce back from the mistakes. Don't be surprised by your mistakes. That's how you learn. That's how you get better. And the other thing I'm thinking is so much of experience, and this has been, they found this out in research. Like if you're looking at a rookie and someone who's experienced, right, the difference isn't reaction time. It is, but it's based on where their eyes go. right? When you have enough experience, you know where to put your eyes. I remember my first football game. I'm playing running back, and I got the ball, and everything just looked like this. That's all I saw was just flashes. I was like, I don't know what happened, but the more I played, okay, everything started to slow down. I could see things, and I could respond to them. So it's just, being willing to make mistakes, be willing to learn from your mistakes, and finding the right fit. And if you do that, the transition, you're gonna be okay, because you're already starting to do the transition work before the recruiting process starts.
I love that. I hope those who are listening, you go back and take notes. Like I said, get the notebook out. If you're listening to it on your iPhone or whatever, pop out your notepad on the iPhone, start taking notes. You can rewind that and listen to what he just said. I love the whole concept of the fit. Think about that. Sometimes I think it's a pride thing. As I work with athletes that are trying to get recruited, a lot of my athletes that are playing basketball, they're going to JUCOs. They're going to junior colleges or smaller like D2s or NAIAs or whatever. And some of them get bummed about that. It's a pride thing. I'm like, no, man, if you're playing at the next level, it's a good thing. But I think they get so caught up at wanting to just be at a school, and then they get disappointed that they're not even seeing the court, in my case, because I'm coaching basketball. But it's like, if they could see the fit and just understand that, they're going to have a much better transition. It's not going to be so hard on them mentally. I love that. I wanted to ask you, because it sounds like you've always been a gifted athlete. And from what I've heard in all the interviews that I've watched you on, and I've read interviews, I've watched the 30 for 30 documentary about everything. I've watched your entire career from the NFL side of things. It seems like you were always a gifted athlete, right? So like, it was like, man, he was just so fast. And then hearing your story, like you were, beating everybody in the 5th grade. But I want to know about the work ethic in the weight room and the training and so forth when you got into the collegiate realm. And then you obviously win the Heisman, and I just want to know like what it takes to get to that level. So the people listening, whether they're college athletes or younger, understand what it actually takes. Because you might be a gifted athlete, but I'm sure you were putting in work somewhere, right? Like to put in the work to keep yourself healthy.
So I'd say I'm gifted athlete, but I think my greatest gift is my work ethic. So part of the story I told earlier when I was in kindergarten is that I wanted to see if I could be the fastest one. Okay. And a lot of athletes, they have that competitive nature, and they want to see if they could be the best. But a lot of times once they see they're the best, they stop.
Yes.
But for me, once I saw that I could do it, I had to do it every single day. That's the key to hard work, right? We've all had a good workout. We've all had a good session. But the thing is, when we have that session that just feels great, can we make that the standard and at least try to hit that on a daily basis to make that the practice? I love to practice so much and practice hard that the success I had in games always surprised me, right? But it's really just my work ethic,
Man, that is what I love. See, I get frustrated when people see somebody who's so gifted, they don't realize what's going on behind the scenes there. Oh, they're just a gifted athlete. Like, yeah, you might have been athletic, but you had the competitive drive and the work ethic that went behind it. And I think that's a missing piece a lot of the times. You've got to have that. That is so awesome, man. So, Ricky, as you were going, what I've heard in interviews too, so I wanted to kind of dissect this a little bit. I've heard a lot of the times you mentioned that your dream was to play college football. It was always a college football. Like you've referenced college football. You won the Heisman. That was a dream. But it didn't seem like, even though I knew you more so for your professional career, in the interviews I've heard, it doesn't seem like you talk as much about your dream of playing professional football. So maybe I'm just mistaking that, but can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit? Was your dream to play college football, and was the NFL even in your sights when you were younger?
No. I was a Chargers fan, so I liked watching professional football. But I never had aspirations to be a professional football player. I guess I didn't identify myself with that image of what I saw the professional football. Like I'm not like a big, like masculine, like tough guy at all. I'm like more sensitive, reflective. And what I loved about the college football experience is that in college, you're a family. It's a family, a college football team, just the amount of time you spend together. And for me, I grew up in San Diego and I was in Texas away from home. And one of the main reasons I chose Texas, part of the fit for me, was that when I was on my recruiting trip, it felt like family. Just a side story here. So on my recruiting trip, and 2 of the players on the team got into a fist fight. We were out on 6th Street and they got into a fight. And 20 minutes later, we were back at the dorm and we were all laughing and hanging out together. And for me, that made such a strong impression on me of that feeling of family. because those things happen in family, right? Family, you get into a fight and everything's fine later. And I was like, I could see myself in this kind of environment with these kinds of guys for a long time.
That's so cool. So I guess my follow-up question to that then would be, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who are just casual fans that didn't know that, like that your goal was to play college football and that you didn't really see yourself playing professional football. But what then made you decide to go there? Was it the money and you're like, man, I can do this and make some good cash flow off this and retire off this kind of thing? Like, obviously, like you were a high level athlete, one of the best to do it in college, but what made you, ultimately say, okay, I can go play professional football, even though I don't necessarily look like the typical macho man with, like you said, you're more reflective, sensitive, and so forth. What made you make that decision?
Well, a couple of things. I think the main reason is I didn't have another plan.
Okay.
Because baseball is hard. I learned because you're a kid, you have a dream and a vision, but as you live life, reality comes in.
Yeah.
And the reality was I can't play every day, for 160 days. That's not that's not it. I'm a seasonal person, right? I'll go hard. I go so hard. I need like an off season,
Yeah.
In baseball, playing minor league baseball, I realized this is not for me. And because I put all my eggs in the athletic basket and I didn't put my eggs in the academic basket, that I didn't really have any other choices. And then the money and the fame and all that stuff, But I feel like if I would have come into college with a clear goal on what I wanted to do academically, then I at least would have had more flexibility and more of a choice. And even if I would have gone in the NFL, I would have had a plan. I'm going to play for this many years so that I can support myself to do these other things that I'd like to do. But I entered the NFL without a plan. And so I kind of was like stuck.
Totally. Okay. So that's insightful. So going back, you would probably have a plan, at least at college, like academically and so forth, so that you could have an idea, like, because there's a lot of people say you don't need a plan B, just go all, like, there's no plan B, but like, do you feel
it's not a plan B? It's not a plan. Like I fell prey to the plan B conversation when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Everyone doesn't make it. I had no doubt I was like going to make it somewhere. So when people said, if you don't make it, have a plan B, I was like, well, that's the response of, go all the way in. It's not a plan B. It's actually a plan A, because even if you're Tom Brady, okay, when Tom Brady retires, if he ever retires, he's still going to have another 40 years probably of his life. Okay. That's not a plan B, right? Because if you look at humanity, right, the purpose of life is to gather experiences. So when we get into our 50s, 60s, 70s, right, that's when we have the most to offer the world. So it's not a plan B. It's more of what is my goal in life, and how can basketball, football, how can what I'm doing right now propel me and help me get there? And I think if I had a larger plan of not just sports and a job, but a larger plan of like what's important to me, it would have kept me more aligned. And even when I became a professional football player, how to utilize, the contacts and the cachet and the perks that I had to further my larger vision.
So insightful, man. That's awesome, because I think a lot of people fall victim to that whole conversation of there's no plan B and so forth. I love what you just said right there. Ricky, as you got into the NFL with the Saints, the first time I ever actually heard about like your social anxiety disorder and everything was during the 30 for 30 documentary. I never knew what was really going on behind the scenes. I just remember hearing that, like, it wasn't as a successful start to your NFL career. Like, I mean, at the beginning, everybody had these high hopes for this, Heisman running back coming into the NFL, and there were some issues there. And I'm just going off the documentary that I had watched. But can you talk to me about your first couple of years in the NFL and maybe the pressures that you felt as a professional athlete and getting used to the professional part of the sport as compared to, like you said, the college game where it's more like a family?
Yeah. So when I left college, because I hadn't really thought beyond, I just assumed that when I go to the NFL, it's going to be similar. But as soon as we played in the Cotton Bowl, my last game in college, and then I started, the awards tour, and then I started training for the combine. And as soon as I started interacting with NFL people, I could just feel it was different.
Yeah.
It was like, it wasn't family. It was the opposite. I was just, a chess piece. I was like the queen. I was a glorified chess piece, but I was just a chess piece. I wasn't a human being anymore. And for me, the money, the fame, it wasn't worth giving up my humanity. And so I struggled with that. And I'm the kind of person, for me to perform well, and as part of the swag, I have to feel good. That's why being in a situation that feels like family was so important to me. And so, especially when I got to New Orleans, the only draft pick, all these guys, why are we giving him all that, right? I haven't proved it just didn't feel like family. And then I got hurt. I got hurt first preseason game, and I battled injuries, something I hadn't done that whole year. So I'm battling injuries and difficulty, and I'm unhappy.
Yeah.
So because part of the recovery process, the healing process, is you got to have energy, you got to have vitality, you got to feel good in order for the body to recover. If you're hurt, banged up, sick, and you don't feel good, whew, like so that year was a lesson, a lesson. And it took me a couple of years, but eventually I had to learn that regardless of what the expectations were from the outside, I had to learn to listen to my heart and take care of myself. And that was a challenge, because when you have all the money and the fame and the things that people think that what people think what life is all about, the good news is you have the ability to have the experience of, I have all these things. This isn't what life is all about. Then you can pursue something more meaningful. And a lot of people live their whole life with the dream of climbing for that thing that they think life is all about. So I feel fortunate that at a young age, I had that experience to know, at least for me, I need something more than this.
So awesome, man. I mean, also, can you tell the audience like what your contract was like when you set up with the Saints? Because to me, I remember that was the first time I had heard that too in the 30 for 30 documentary. So how did you set up your rookie contract when you first signed with the Saints?
So I told my agent, I told my agent what I wanted, and I said, I'm the only draft pick, and there's a rookie pool. So a team has so much money they can spend on their rookies, and I was the only rookie. So I said, just get me the signing bonus, just get me the whole pool of money, and everything else I do, I should have to earn through incentives. And I made really lofty incentives, because growing up, again, I didn't have a vision of being an NFL player, but growing up, what I heard people say about professional athletes or NFL players is that it's all about the money. And so I saw, me coming into the NFL, Heisman Trophy winner, everyone's going to be looking at what I do. I saw it as an opportunity to be an example,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man,
but
so
it didn't go. I mean, it wasn't received as a good example. It was received as someone who was dumb and didn't take advantage of their leverage.
That's the thing, though. I wish more people were like that. When I heard that for the first time, I had to have been, I don't know, 21, 22, and I had no idea that that's how the contract was set up, and I figured out all that stuff. And I'm like, man, the pressures that were just I thought I was like, man, you put a lot of pressure on himself, then you battled injuries and all that stuff, but just all the stuff.
Here's the thing, though. Like when we say pressure, my point was, I have, my signing bonus was almost $9 million. Okay. And then my base salary, a couple $100,000. Okay. To me, that took all the pressure off.
Yeah.
Because for me, I wasn't playing for the money. Like, to me, the value of being in the NFL wasn't the excess of millions. It was the opportunity to have a platform to share what was important to me. But when I got the platform and I started sharing what was important to me, like not playing for the money, for using this platform to make a difference, to inspire people, they called me weird and that I was stupid. It wasn't a positive thing. I was denigrated for doing that. And so my whole meaningful purpose of being in the NFL was negated from day one. No one really cared what I had to say or how I felt, because it didn't fit into their box of what an athlete should be.
That brings me to another question for you, because I've always respected you. This is a big reason. It wasn't just because of the swag. It was because even back then, when I didn't fully understand all the different things, you stood for something that was different. You were always just standing for something that was different than what the, stereotypical athlete, the NFL guy would be. And when there was when you had left the NFL and you were an advocate, you're an advocate for cannabis, and we'll get into that in just a little bit with the whole Heisman brand and everything too. But learning more about that, like, you stood up for something that you felt was right, and you did you. And that's very hard for people to do, especially in the NFL, because they're getting a hefty paycheck and they kind of transform into this different person. I guess now in the world, a lot of younger kids are struggling with the same thing at a young age. Like they're being molded into something that they might not truly be. And you've talked about it already, Ricky, about like finding who you are, being happy with who you are. Is there any advice you could give to us about how you were able to accomplish that and be able to do that and still stay sane, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, the easy, cheap answer is that I've always felt it was my calling. And I think just growing up in Southern California, and So I was talking about my elementary school. So what they did in a lot of school districts is when they started busing kids across town, to create integration, is they started creating these magnet programs where they would have the advanced classes and then the regular classes, and that was a way to kind of keep the races separate,
Okay.
But somehow I guess I tested high for my IQ, and so I was put in the advanced track. So I was different than all of the different background, different experience, different from all the kids that I was around all the time. And so I think I identified with being the outsider. And so I think I always wanted to feel like to use my fame to champion and create space and to create room and to be a role model for people who feel like they're outsiders. Because the part of us that is unique and different, right, is the part of us where we're going to feel like outsiders. And until we can embrace that and realize that if we can contribute our uniqueness to the group, it's going to add more diversity, it's going to be more interesting, and it's going to give other people more permission to be themselves. And I think in any group, right, even in any relationship, when people are being themselves, it's just more fulfilling. It's more fruitful. And if you're being yourself, that's more fulfilling and fruitful because you don't have to use energy to keep parts of yourself tamped down. And I did that for a long time, and I hated it. And I felt like, I'm famous now. I don't have to do that, so I'm not going to anymore. And it was kind of a process of that. And that, to me, that was the real value of fame, was freedom.
Ooh.
And so my advice to people is be curious about what's unique and different about you, and be curious about how your environment, your team, the people around you can benefit from that. Because it's going to be rare that you find someone from the outside telling you to be who you really are. Mainly people want you to be what they want you to be.
Totally, man. As you went away from the NFL, and you came back to the Dolphins, and I remember there was a suspension. There was a suspension based on the drug policy and whatnot, and then you went up to Canada for a short period of time. To my understanding, I thought you got hurt. Didn't you break your arm?
I broke my arm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like your forearm or something. I just remember I was so bummed because you looked so dope in that like outfit too up there up in Canada too. But it's just wild. But you had the opportunity to come back, and you knew the drug policy. And this is what I kind of wanted to get into. You don't have to give specifics or anything, but I've talked to David Irving, and maybe you know who David Irving is.
Yep.
So I've had him on my show before, and he talked about his advocacy for cannabis, obviously. And he talked about all this stuff and, went into detail with the drug policy. And I know the NFL has become more lenient, at least the NBA specifically has been more lenient. NFL's getting there.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is, I always had this question that now that I have you here, I would love to ask you is, you knew that you weren't going to stop, and you knew the drug policy was what it was. How did you go about like mentally saying like, well, I'm going to come in here and be able to play still? Did you think that you would even be able to play without getting suspended? I guess I just was wondering, like, he knew he wasn't going to stop. So how did we go about this with this ridiculous policy they had in the first place, in my opinion?
So, and this is the way I understand it. Okay. Is I'm the kind of person that, if I feel called to do something, there's nothing's really going to stop me.
I love it.
And my thing is, I'm going to figure a way to do it. And if I get caught or I break the rules, I just suffer the consequences and just keep on moving. I grew up Christian. So I grew up with the myth of the guy that gets pinned to the cross, for sticking true to his beliefs. So I had kind of a role model that I could like call back on when I felt like I was doing what I needed to do, what was right for me, what I was called to do, but the external structures around me didn't agree. But if people don't do that, then these external structures don't ever evolve. They stay stuck in the past. And so eventually I embraced like being an innovator and just and changing stupid rules. And we're getting there. But to me, it's crazy being in the football environment and to see how many pharmaceuticals they give us, Ambien, Indocin, Toradol, opioids. It's insane.
Oh yeah.
And just to experience it, like, if you take Indocin or Toradol and you don't eat before, it's the worst constipation ever. Oh my God, it hurts so bad. I don't mean to be. No,
this is good. It's candid, man. I love it.
Too candid, but it's like it's uncomfortable, and just that whole mentality. It drove me crazy. And I started smoking with one of my teammates, and I noticed that it helped not only help my body feel better, but it helped me relieve a lot of the stress and change my perspective and see the bigger picture. And so the cannabis was so helpful to me, and like, it's a joke. And I think people who overvalue money don't get it. But when I did the math, what cannabis was giving me was more than what football was giving me. Football was tearing my body up. It was making me it was overriding me with stress. It was putting me around situations and people that I didn't really vibrate with. And so when I looked at it, cannabis helped clear my mind and help me realize I don't need to be doing this. There's other things that I need to be doing that are going to feel more meaningful to me. And it really supported me in that process of making the transition to a life that feels more meaningful to me.
So interesting. Yeah, I love that, man. So here's you kind of answered my question there too, because you talked about how it helped you with your mental state as well. I mean, for someone who is battling with, anxiety and so forth, it was so taboo back then. It's still kind of taboo now, but not as much. More and more people that are, I guess, the higher level athletes and, celebrities and so forth are coming out with, being more open about their mental health, but it's still sort of quiet, especially for men. But you talked about how it helped you with the mental aspect. We talked about pharmaceuticals. I talked to Max Hall. He was a former quarterback in the NFL. He played for BYU. Then he was playing for Arizona, and he played, variety of places. And he talked about that's how his addiction started, was because they were pumping him full of different, opioids when he got hurt, and he was trying to keep his contract because he wanted to make a team so he could make his next contract, get paid. Lo and behold, he becomes addicted to drugs, and then it spiraled down a whole new, after football, he was, cocaine and all sorts of things, and it was causing problems. And, we had that same conversation about, cannabis and just kind of what that could have been for him. And it's just interesting to me. I love that. Here's the other part of this. You stay true to your beliefs and who you were. And you said, okay, well, I'm going to suffer the consequences if it is, but I'm going to be me. To the people who think, and I might've been this type of person back in the day, that those who smoke weed are these lazy, can't get it done. They can't execute. I'll never have them at my job. Well, I would like to look at your career as the example of you really think that somebody who smokes marijuana is lazy? You had a very successful career with that on there. So what would you say to the people who claim that, if we legalize it, they're going to be lazy. We're not going to have productive workers in the job force and everything. What would your statement be to them?
Well, a couple of things. One is the way I view people when they start smoking and they become lazy, right? It's more that they realize that they're enslaving themselves to something that doesn't feel good to them.
Yeah.
Right. But I feel like sometimes people get stuck there. And the next step is to think of what would feel good to me, And I think that's part of the stigma. But also I think another part, something that is important to say, is a lot of people, athletes, when they talk about using cannabis, and people, they feel more comfortable talking about it helps with pain and inflammation, okay? Or even people when they're talking about using it for anxiety. The way I hear people talk about it, they use it like an antidepressant, where it just helps me feel better in the moment. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what I call self-psychotherapy, and people that have had experience with cannabis, sometimes when you smoke, they might call it paranoia, but it's all those thoughts, those parts of yourself that you don't want to deal with and you don't want to look at, and you keep pushing down. When you smoke, you can't hide from those. You can't hide from those places, and it forces you to have to deal with them. But when you deal with them, you get more clear about who you are and what's important to you, and it's easier to make those decisions moving forward. So the people on the couch, I would say, when you're on the couch and you're smoking, think about what you'd really like to do with your life. What's going to be meaningful? What's going to feel good to you? That's because when something is stigmatized or taboo, we don't ever talk about how to use it properly. We just say, don't use it. And now that it's becoming more legal, or people just have greater access to it, we need to start shifting the conversation. People that have experience, people that have shown that they know how to consume cannabis and use it to enhance the quality of their lives, those people need to have a stage. And that's why I launched Highsman. Our tagline is Spark Greatness. There's so many conversations going on in the world right now about cannabis, but I don't hear anyone talking about how can this help me achieve greatness. And as a football player, that's everything I did was, how do I use this to achieve greatness? Right? Everything I did, including cannabis. And so I think people that have had that mindset, they have real knowledge that the world needs and is going to need in the future as more people start consuming cannabis.
Talking about Heisman that you mentioned, you're the visionary behind it. Tell us a little bit more about the brand, what it exactly is, because you said that's why I launched Heisman. Now people are probably like, okay, I want to know more. So tell us what Heisman's all about, so we can find out about that.
Yeah, so it's a brand, and it's really interesting stepping into the industry, and because there's so many brands, right? And what I see most brand is that let me make something that looks really cool that people can connect to, and we trick them into buying us. Okay. But my vision of a brand is like when I was a kid, I'm a big Bo Jackson fan, Nike, right? Bo knows, right? That commercial, classic, right? When I put on Nikes, right? When I put those on, I felt like Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
That's a brand, something that like it moves you, something you really something that inspires you, something that you can put on your body, you can consume, you can interact with. And there's values that are really important to you. And by interacting with that brand, it builds those values up in you. That's my idea of a brand. And so when I launched Highsman, I was thinking, like, because of my story, and I meet people all the time, right? People come up to me with a smile. I always know they're smokers, right? Because we talk, we dap it up, and we start having these amazing conversations. And I realized most of the people out there, they don't have a cannabis brand that's inspirational. And so I said, I'm an inspiring person. I love cannabis, and I have a story. Why not put this brand out into the world to give people something to rally around and embrace these meaningful qualities of sparking greatness and inner self-reflection, and realizing that to truly have greatness, you have to feel good on the inside about what you're doing on the outside.
And that is so awesome. So spark greatness kind of being the tagline behind it. If somebody wants to find out more about Heisman, do they just go to Heisman.com, or where can we find more about that, Ricky?
Heisman.com. Yeah, Heisman.com.
Okay.
So, right now we have flower, we have flower, working on edibles, but we don't just sell weed, it's the idea, like, even I think when someone is consuming cannabis that's from our brand Heisman, that the idea of spark greatness, at least a seed of a thought is in there, at least if they're thinking about what I've accomplished in my life and the things that I say and what they hear, and if they've been inspired by it, that enters into their altered state, that enters into their ritual time, right? And I feel like that's a way that I can touch a lot of people with my story and my life that shares a lot of the same interest.
Totally. I'm going to put that link here in the description for everybody who's listening to this. Check it out. This is awesome. I love the vision behind it, the entrepreneurial side of you and stuff, just on top of just the athlete. Like, you've got the entrepreneurial side, the business side, like you've got the vision, and I respect that a lot. Ricky, as we kind of get towards the tail end of the interview, I kind of want to ask you about some football talk in your professional career at the different cities that you played. I mean, New Orleans, you had Miami, Baltimore, you played up in Canada. I just want to kind of talk to you about, like, where your favorite place was. Just talk about a favorite memory that you had. Where was your favorite place to play, and what was your favorite NFL memory that you had during the long career that you had in the NFL?
Yeah, that's easy. My favorite place was Miami by far. And
why is that? Why Miami? Is it the beaches? What was it about Miami?
It was just the role that Miami played in my story. So, 3 years in New Orleans, ups and downs, had 2,000-yard seasons, but a lot of injury. And I got traded to Miami, perennial playoff team, great defense, needed a running back. And it was Miami. Okay. And another thing, one of my best friends in the world at the time, still is, Dan Lebitard, lived in Miami. So got to move in the same town as my best friend, with a fresh start. And that first year, just the whole first year, except for the last 5 minutes of the season. But that whole first year was my favorite NFL experience. You mentioned I was an All-Pro. I was an All-Pro running back that year, led the NFL in rushing, went to the Pro Bowl, the MVP of the Pro Bowl. But, last game of the year, we were up on the Tom Brady and the Patriots with like 3 minutes left. They tie it up, go and beat us in overtime, and we missed the playoffs. So great year, but it didn't end so well. But still, that was a magical time for me in the NFL.
So cool, dude. Who was your favorite teammate that you ever played with, and why?
Ronnie Brown. Ronnie Brown, because, very often when you have, 2 first-round picks playing the same position, it can be competitive. Yeah. But we worked out together. We shared notes. We had each other's back. It was amazing. You know, a great player, a great person. And just to have that kind of that big heart, not to want to hog the spotlight and to be able to share it, it was special.
Yeah, I thought that duo was amazing. Like, you guys had such a good backfield there with the two of you. You guys, that's so cool. I didn't know if you guys were ever friends or not. I just figured you guys were solid as athletes and competitors together. So, and in regards to, that's someone you played with, who would you say is the best athlete you played against during your professional career?
That's another easy one. Ray Lewis is like,
okay.
That is easy. You know, he was fast, he was big, he was smart, he could anticipate. He is a force, you know, all through his career from the beginning. And I played against him kind of in the middle, and I played with him his last couple of one of his last years, and he was like a tank even in practice, you know. So
dude, that's funny because, you know, we all see it. We see the motivational speaking from him. Everyone thinks it, but now you had an opportunity to play against him and with him. So in the NFL, I'm sure there's a lot of games where there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of noise. One of the things I would like for the athletes that are listening to this, Ricky, is just to kind of get some insight from you. When you're dealing with the pressures, maybe you're down, the game isn't going the way that you want it to go. How do you refocus and recenter so that you can really just execute and not let the noise in the game and all the outside pressures, when the storm hits, essentially, is what I always tell my athletes. Storm's hitting. Now we got to refocus and recenter, because you can't just close your eyes and it's gone. You've actually got to fight through it and go. So maybe a piece of advice from you on how you refocus and recenter.
Find one thing to focus on, one thing, and just focus on that.
Oh, simple enough.
Because the mind goes like this and it starts freaking out. But if you find one thing that you can focus on, and it's helpful if it's something that you have practiced focusing on, because the energy of the chaos is so strong. You got to have a strong focus energy. And so for me in a running play, I would always focus on the play side foot of the center.
Okay.
I just would focus on that one spot. And when the ball was snapped, it worked. So find one thing to focus on.
Wow. Okay. That's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Last 3 questions for you. Biggest life lesson that football taught you, if you can rewind and just look back at everything so far. Biggest life lesson that football taught you.
It's the importance of team. You know, and team, to me, team means that we're a group, that we've agreed upon one goal, and we each understand our role in achieving that goal.
I love it.
And so even, as an entrepreneur running a startup, I'm taking everything I've learned from my coaches and I'm applying it to what I'm doing. And like I'm saying, the most important thing is team, and making sure that everyone on the team, knows what their role is and feels appreciated for their contribution.
You read my mind, because my next question was about what you learned and acquired during your sports journey that you're now applying into your business journey. So that was perfect. You already caught that one. So I love that. So I guess the last question I'd have for you, Ricky, is what is the best advice you received ever in your life from a mentor of yours? And who was it, if you don't mind sharing the mentor?
Yeah. So mentor's name is Gary Douglas. And the best advice was, if you feel stuck, ask a question. Ask a question. And it's just the power of questions, because usually when you're stuck, it's because you think you have the answer. And the way to unlock the fact that you think you have the answer is to ask a question.
Is there ever a time specifically in your life that you were able to apply that?
Oh, every day.
Okay.
Every day. It's one of those pieces of advice that I take with me and I utilize at least 50 times a day.
I love it.
Yeah.
Man, I just appreciate you being willing to join me, Ricky. This has been awesome having that conversation with you. And again, for everybody who's listening, hopefully you guys enjoyed this interview. And make sure to go to Heisman.com. I'll put the link here in the description and share that with everybody. But just, one more time, a massive thank you to you, Ricky, for joining the Gametime Guru podcast, sir.
No, keep up the good work. This is great. Thank you.
Appreciate you. For everybody listening, make sure to tune in, subscribe to the show. We'll be coming to you next week with another interview. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.